This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1873, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, movie review.
Welcome to Comic Geek Speak. I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Shane Kelly.
And I'm Chris Eberly.
And welcome to this special movie review episode of the podcast, which is coming to you from the CGS studio, finally.
Yes.
Yes, so this is as good a time as any, in fact, to thank all of you. We're pointing invisibly at you right now for your kind contributions via Patreon and any other outlet that you have chosen to support the show over the years, for helping to keep the lights on in this place. We're happy that we're actually physically present in the studio and making use of these facilities that our listeners have helped to support.
Yes, thank you very much. It's damn good to be here, gentlemen.
Indeed it is.
Yes, it is, as Chris is fond of remarking, a tonic for the spirit. Oh. Yes, and after a long day in the tinsel trenches of the Christmas bonnets, I was happy to go out and see this latest Marvel cinematic masterpiece with good friends, and then come back here directly to the studio to discuss it.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we all just came just moments ago from, what's the name of the theater again?
Fox Theater in Berkshire.
Fox Theater in Berkshire, with your son. Mm-hmm. Ben joined us, which is great.
Yeah, he did.
And
that was fun.
We're here to discuss this much anticipated, 4 years in the making, sequel to Black Panther back in 2018.
Yep. Suffered quite a few reversals along the way.
Yes, it did.
Chief among them, the loss of the star.
Yes. And I should let the audience know that I've seen this movie twice now in this weekend. I saw it last night and tonight. I'm glad I did, because I think I'll just have so much more to add to the discussion, having seen it twice.
Of course.
I always like seeing it the second time. You can engulf yourself in what's happening around, not really worry about the story. You can hear the story, but see a lot more.
Focus on some of the finer details.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear what your gentlemen's initial thoughts are. Shane?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. I absolutely loved how they honored Chadwick Boseman in it, and I thought they did a pretty good job with it.
Murd?
It's the word that comes to mind is majesty. It was really beautifully conceived and filmed. It's just the tone, the look of it. The pacing also, it reminded me a little of the Eternals, only much more entertaining and significantly more substantive. Yeah. This was a movie that had something to say. So I thought that the hidden technological wonderland of Wakanda was brought to film, just beautifully for the second time now. I do think that the pacing got a little bit indulgent after a little. It did drag a little bit in spots. Mm-hmm. But I must confess, I came into the theater. I haven't really been looking forward to seeing this movie, to be honest. It's not the company that gave me pause. It's just I was concerned how well a Black Panther movie without T'Challa would work.
It's a reasonable concern.
Fair point.
Yeah. And I was also concerned I wouldn't care for their take on Namor and his proud, albeit fictitious, Atlantean heritage. Mm-hmm. And, well, I needn't have worried about how well the rest of the world of Wakanda and its supporting cast would carry this movie without its late lamented star, because it was just fine. I learned to love these other characters more than I ever had before, and every time M'Baku, for example, came on screen, it was an absolute delight.
Yeah.
I feel I was a little more justified in worrying about Namor, though, because, while it was well thought out, and a lot of it looked and felt right, especially like the I can't say Talokan, but the Atlantean warriors clinging to the sides of the war whales as they went to battle in the middle of the ocean. The blue skin tone, the Atlantean technology, it all basically looked right, but just trying to filter it all through the lens of ancient Mayan culture. I mean, Atlantean culture is supposed to be thousands of years older than the ancient Mayans. And I understand what they were going for. They wanted to create a Mesoamerican equivalent to the Afro-futuristic technotopia that is Wakanda.
And they might have been concerned since Aquaman already has Atlantis. They may not have wanted to go into that.
Yeah. Which is frankly absurd. It's Hollywood studio thinking. It's the... taking Namor away from Atlantis or vice versa because Aquaman has already been made with Aquaman as Lord of Atlantis is a little bit like saying, okay, we want to make a Santa Claus movie, but WB just did a Santa Claus movie last year that had Santa Claus living at the North Pole, so we have to have Santa living at Hong Kong so that people don't accuse us of plagiarism or something. Atlantis is a part of world folklore, people. I mean, I can understand they could even sort of sculpt the Atlantean cultural trappings to resemble ancient Mesoamerica if they wanted, but just let Namor be from Atlantis.
I knew that would get under your skin.
Yeah, it did. It did. I'm sorry. It's maybe a personal quibble of mine, but yeah, I'm sorry. Namor is Atlantean.
I won't disagree, and I thought it. I wasn't sure I would like it, but I liked it more than I anticipated. So I didn't mind it. Mostly because with Marvel movies, I've come to expect when they make a change, it still makes sense and serves the story well enough that almost anything they've changed throughout the entire history of the movie so far serves the universe that they're creating well. So I felt it was well done, and I quite enjoyed it.
What I would say to that, and Murd, I'm so glad we're here all together. And it's like I just put on a warm blanket because I knew you wouldn't like the fact they got rid of Atlantis. And it's reassuring. I love Namor. And the reason why I love Namor, despite everything you just described, which I think are all valid points, is that I thought the essence of the character was there. And the scene I always go back to, because since I've now seen it twice, I was looking forward to it a second time. Right before he kills the queen, and he's looking at her, the sheer wrath and rage in his face. I'm like, oh, there it is. Like, I found him actually frightening in the film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ways. Like, he was truly frightening.
He was menacing.
When he came out of the water the first time when they were camping, and he just comes out like that.
Yeah, pointed ears, winged ankles, and all.
And then it worked. And then when he came to confront the queen, and he said, I will kill you. And I was like, wow. Like, Bill, if there's an afterlife, Bill Everett's smiling right now because that is the core of the character, and they got it.
I was going to ask you that because I know of Submariner Namor, but I don't know a lot about him or how he is. I wanted to ask you if he is that ruthless.
Yes. In fact,
on occasion.
Yes. Well, if you can go back to our Spotlight on the Submariner, Murd and I did episode 1718 back in 2018.
Chris told me he was listening back to it this afternoon.
Okay. Yes. And if you go back to his Golden Age origins, he's like in the Golden Age, for example, he floods New York City and kills thousands of people.
Yep. He's as much antagonist to the surface world as protagonist.
And then he's had many different, like Murd said, vicissitudes where sometimes he's heroic, other times he's more malevolent, or at least the interests of his kingdom clash with the interests of the surface world, which I think this movie also really captured really effectively.
Yeah. In the 90s, John Byrne actually explained these... The huge variations in his mood and motivations over the years as being like there's a biological basis for it. If he's out of the water for too long, it's like the oxygen levels in his blood creates an imbalance in his brain.
Okay, well,
so that
makes sense.
Yeah. My initial thoughts, obviously, as many listeners know, I'm a huge fan of the whole world of Black Panther. I revere the first film. And like Murd, I was wondering, all right, how are they going to pull this off? And I went into this movie with what I call now the Phantom Menace caveat. What I mean by that is, when Phantom Menace came out, I was so starved for Star Wars that I convinced myself it was a good movie when I left it. And then sometime later, I realized, no, this is not a good movie at all. And I went into this movie thinking, all right, even though I so love these characters in this world and the whole comic book history behind it, I'm going to go into it, without rose-colored glasses. And let me tell you, I think it's one of the best films Marvel has done yet. I think several key things they did right. Number one, they retained the same director from the first film. And it's obvious from the beginning. His vision, he co-wrote the script. And what he pulled off here was this is one of the most emotional films Marvel has done.
Yeah.
And as you said, Shane, from the opening scene to the very end, this movie is a tribute to Chadwick Boseman and the character he portrayed in that film. And I think and again, the acting was superb because all the characters, and I'm sure the actors themselves in playing these roles, thinking about the actor they were working with, you felt the grief, the heartache, and the loss. And that elevated this beyond typical popcorn superhero flick.
Yeah.
And when we think about the resonance of the first Black Panther film, what that meant to so many people, and the success it had.
Cultural phenomenon is a term that's been bandied about.
And this film, I think, not only honored that, but took it to the next level. Because think about it, as Murd was saying, the lead character in this film and in real life has died. And they took all that and they made a great film.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a great film. I think Letitia Wright has just elevated herself to a leading actress. Like, think about the pressure that must have been on her. Because let's face it, Shuri in the first movie is there as a supporting character. She's like the humanizing character who brings like humor to the story. And now suddenly she has to carry the entire in that film, the kingdom, and then in the movie herself. And the emotion she showed in her performance, from the opening scene when she's desperately trying to save him, to right through to the revelations at the end when she's on the beach. Great acting. Angela Bassett's going to get nominated for an Oscar. I guarantee it. Without question, she'll get nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
That's one of my disappointments, but only not because it doesn't serve the story well, but that she died in this, but she had to, the way the story was written.
Yes.
But me personally, I'm disappointed because I really liked her in this role.
Yeah, she was great. The other initial thought I would say again is that I thought the movie did a wonderful job also of further expanding the Marvel Cinematic Universe, tying it back into the essence of the comics. Murd and I are going to talk about it a little bit. I asked people to read my favorite Black Paris story, which is Storm und Drang, issues 26 to 30 from the Priest run, which I think has some parallels in some ways to the movie we just saw. But I think what this movie did so effectively, and I was hoping that it would, and they did, is that they went into a part of the Marvel universe that they had not explored at all, which is the Submariner.
Right, under the waves.
And he is like he's besides the Golden Age Human Torch, he's the original Marvel character.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely thrilling. I mean, when I watched this the first time, when those divers are down there, it's like a horror film.
Oh, yeah.
And because in the Golden Age, when the Submariner first appears, remember this, he comes across two salvage divers and he kills them in Marvel Comics #1. So I'm sure they were thinking of that when they had these two people go down there. But when the lights go out and you just hear them screaming, I'm like, oh, they're doing this, right? And when they show that helicopter and the terror of those two people in there, and you don't really see him. You just see like a shadowy figure. And then the helicopter is just destroyed. And what's exciting is I think probably a lot of people in the movie don't even know who the Submariner is at all. And they don't realize how, as M'Baku said, well, he's basically the Hulk. So how are we going to beat him?
Yeah.
Which is fair because the two have clashed multiple times.
Yeah. And I think in the movie they really showed you, like the special effects of him flying, I thought were stunning. Like when he's like destroying ships and he's darting and evading the missiles and everything else.
Now,
it was amazing.
Doesn't even give people a chance to stop and think about how ridiculous the eagle wings are. I think Coogler had to fight pretty hard to have that detail of the character preserved.
It's not the Submariner without the wings. My God.
Here's my only question about that in the movie verse that we're talking about. So his kingdom is extremely powerful.
Yes.
And
it's like a global power in the Marvel Universe.
And it could have easily wiped out Wakanda in seconds. Even with that first attack.
Well, not necessarily, because Wakanda is just as powerful as
it is,
Namor's kingdom.
But they were not faring very well in this movie in the first attack.
No, and
at all.
there's a story in recent years where Namor floods Wakanda.
So if Namor is so angry at the surface world for all these hundreds of years that he's been alive, why didn't he just wipe out what he wanted to? Because he could have easily done it.
But there's no
question.
movie.
Oh, I understand. I understand that. But out of anything that I loved about this movie, that is one little caveat that I'm like,
I think they were trying to explain it as he wanted to remain in seclusion. And one scene I thought was really well done.
So it's only once somebody interfered with...
Well, I think in this version.
Okay.
When Nakia goes to the Yucatan Peninsula, and the old woman says, well, others have tried to find the serpent god, and they all vanished into the depths, as she put it. I found that chilling because you get the sense that, as he should be, like in the comic, Namor is like almost like a mythological figure. and people aren't sure if he's real or not, and like people have seen glimpses of him. And there's a great comic book story called Submariner: The Depths by Peter Milligan and Asad Ribic from several years ago, which is like an out of continuity story where it's about a mythbuster who takes a sub down into the deep to prove the Submariner and Atlantis do not exist. And in the story, the crew starts to gradually go mad and vanish. And you realize, and they barely show you Namor in the comic. Everything's dark, and they're in a sub and suffocating. But when they get glimpses, like he's terrifying. And you know, you can imagine what happens. But I think they went for that, and that they and like Murd said, like how powerful he is, but also really how frightening he is. Like you said, when they're on the beach doing the ceremony, and then he just comes out of the water.
Yeah.
And plus, the actor, who I thought was tremendous.
Yeah, I did too.
Like he was he was ripped. Like he looked powerful, the broad shoulders. But like Murd said, when he elevates with the wings, and I was like, oh, look at this! This is amazing. Like the Submariner. Like
so, it's not that he was actively seeking out to attack the world. It's only when they interfered with his kingdom. By those divers going down trying to mine.
Well, what would you guys think about making the vibranium in the because basically the vibranium is why he became the Submariner in this version. What did you guys think of that?
I didn't mind it because it's in the universe that we're dealing with. I don't know if I would have written it that way myself, but
yeah, I think the properties of vibranium are beginning to be stretched a little bit too far and wide. You know, it's getting to be like the Hawkman's nth metal on the DC side. It's just this magic material that has any properties the writers needed to have.
Or the 60s catch-all of, it's radiation.
Basically, yeah. I prefer the comics explanation that the ancient Atlanteans acquired their blue skin tone and ability to breathe water thanks to ancient sorcery.
But I did like the fact that he and I'm sure this is a setup for the future when he said, I'm a mutant.
Right.
This is the first time we've heard that word.
Not quite.
No? Yeah, because I was thinking in Multiverse of Madness, they might have said it.
Mutation, if not, but that came up very significantly at the end of Ms. Marvel.
Okay.
Oh, that's right, Murd. That's right. You
even played a few notes of the 90s X-Men theme song when they said it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. I apologize. Yep. So this is the second time they've mentioned it. Because, in the 90s, Namor was the first mutant. That was the tagline.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just to try to boost his sales back in the days when the X-Men were king.
I having seen the film twice now, every time, the highlight for me of the movie was, all the actors, they all came back from the first movie. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a testament to the writing, the directing, and their acting that you felt, even though they can only do so much in the time they had, that you felt the depth of their relationships, their friendships, and how they've all been affected by the death of T'Challa. And let me tell you that's for Coogler to pull that off the way he has in this movie, because this movie they could have taken the easy way out and said, "Well, we're going to recast T'Challa."
Oh, sure.
Which is what most times they probably would have done that. But I don't know pretend to know the background, but I'm glad that they respected the director's vision and they went the direction they did, because I was deeply moved by this film.
Yeah.
I really was, far more than most of the other comic book movies, because, the Black Panther died, and then they're not shying away from that, and then they take it in this direction where you feel the weight of that, but you also can appreciate all the characters, how they're reacting, how they're interacting, how they're trying to help each other. This is easily in my top 5 MCU already, without question.
I thought it was very well done.
Yeah,
I was a little surprised at how abruptly the Black Panther's death was addressed. It's like they didn't waste any time chucking poor T'Challa into his coffin at the beginning, and they really didn't say much of anything about the nature of his
They're probably going to leave that undisclosed.
Yeah,
leave it to the audience to assume that he just died of colon cancer, as Boswick himself did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Boseman did.
I liked how they tied, again, consequences. By the way, Michael B. Jordan appeared in the Ancestral Hall. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I was glad for that too.
Like the way he was sitting there so arrogantly in the throne with his knee up. But they remind you of the consequences of him destroying all the herb, because she couldn't save him.
Yeah.
And you assume that she could have if the herb had still
been around,
been in abundance. So that scene was superb.
Yes, and this was the one of her deceased relatives that Shuri was calling out for subconsciously while she was under the effects of the herb. That would be pretty terrifying if you're Shuri.
Yeah, that was...
It's terrifying if you're anybody, really.
What? Well, let's start to break it down. So, one thing I liked about the movie immensely, and that's also why I wanted to talk about this arc and the priest run. This movie further established some of the geopolitical dynamics of the Marvel world in the movies. So you see the United States and what it's doing, the United Nations, they're all demanding access to Wakanda's resources and all of that, which is always a running theme in the book as well. I love when they pick on the French, but they brought, they have the French ambassador there, like, when they bring in the mercenaries. That was pure Wakanda, though. Like, we didn't kill them, but we're showing you, and next time we will, basically. That was right out of the comic. That was really well done.
I like that Richard Schiff was the United States ambassador.
He was on West Wing, wasn't he? Yeah.
And he was also, what's his name in Man of Steel? The Professor Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
In the first Superman movie.
That's right. Well
first
done.
new Superman movie.
God, I missed you.
Honestly, even forgotten that Hamilton was in that movie.
Yeah, that's right.
I haven't seen it in so long.
I like. You know what?
Don't care to see it again.
Total sidebar, but Jamie always loved Richard Schiff, and we would talk about his performances and different things at times. So whenever
Jamie reference is never a sidebar, honey.
Right. So anytime I see Richard Schiff, I pay a little bit more attention than what I would have before those conversations.
So that's one of the things I really loved about this film was they started to further explore that dynamic and how and like again, this is where the Submariner is always the classic shade of gray character, because he basically said, well, you know that if they could, they would all come after you and kill you and take your vibranium from you. He's right.
Oh, yeah.
And I love when they explore, like when she and he are talking when he brings her to the kingdom, and they're basically negotiating, essentially. And I really enjoyed sort of the matter-of-fact back and forth. It was like, I'd like to be your allies, and if you support me, and he wants to go to war with the surface world, which is vintage Namor. Like I'm going after the surface world, essentially. But watching those scenes and the back and forth, I thought was really well done, really smart. I like this movie actually asked a little bit more of the audience, because these are monarchs essentially negotiating the fate of millions, if not the world. And even at the end, when Namora comes to him and she's like, well, why I wanted to fight by it, and then he explains to her, like, this is what we're going to do. And that's the part of Namor that you see in this story we're going to talk about later, who is the strategist who's thinking about, well, how this is going to affect the interests of my kingdom down the road. And I cannot wait, and I'm assuming they're going to do this, that when they bring him to Fantastic Four, I want to see the tension with Sue Storm immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And because the way the actor played Namor was, he could also be kind of subtle and more, always menacing, always, but a little more calm, refined. And then if you don't follow along with what he wants,
and to me at this moment, like he said in the film, he has no love for anything but his kingdom.
Yep.
Right.
So then Sue's
Sin amor.
Sue's gonna like shake that up a little bit. I would hope if they do it right.
I hope they go in that direction.
Yeah.
You mentioned M'Baku, or Murd mentioned it. You're right. Every time he appeared, even more than the first film, he like stole it. I mean, I was.
But yet I like how they wrote him to be, well, I promised your brother I would take care of you.
Because in the first movie he's more of like the upstart challenger. Now he's more of the wise man who's there to provide. He might even end up being the king. Basically, they're kind of alluding to that at the end. Yeah. Because she probably doesn't want that.
Well, I was surprised that they didn't refer to her as queen throughout it. One person did.
It was M'Baku himself. He said, "You're the queen now."
And Namor said that.
Namor did it too.
Oh, yes. Namor
I'm sorry.
said
that.
But nobody else ever through the whole. Rest of the film.
I'm wondering if she doesn't want that role.
Yeah.
And by making M'Baku, like the scene where after the funeral for Ramonda, where he's trying to counsel her, it's a wiser M'Baku. It's M'Baku is not as he's actually doesn't want to go to war. He's trying to find a way to avoid it.
Yep.
Essentially, because he obviously sees how powerful Namor is. So I really like he brings humor to it. Like he's the vegetarian, so he has the carrot he's eating in the beginning, and the whoo, and all that stuff is great.
Yeah, he's a Falstaffian figure.
Exactly. Well put.
But with more wisdom and responsibility.
Yeah. So I can't wait to see how they use him. Well, I hope they make a third movie, but
yeah, I hope so too.
Seems like a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, going forward.
And there's also going to be an Ironheart Disney Plus series.
Yeah, what do we think of her?
I never read anything about that character. I know Ironheart's out there, but I've never read anything. I liked it. I liked how they put it together. The only thing was her dorm room was gorgeous.
Well, it's Harvard or MIT,
I guess, but that was a massive room. That was like a house. But I really did like her, and I liked how the Queen treated her, and then she in turn wanted to do anything she could to help Wakanda.
Yep.
It was very well
I'm
done.
interested to see again how her show unfolds, because I thought the actress was very winning in the role.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Murd.
For a brief and terrible moment, I was afraid the inventor of the vibranium detector was going to turn out to be Lunella Lafayette, as in Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, a character I kind of hate. So I was relieved to find it was Riri Williams.
You're not a Devil Dinosaur fan?
I'm not a Moon Girl fan. Devil Dinosaur's fine. Yeah, but yeah, I agree that the actress played that character well, and I'm interested enough to want to see more of her. What else was I going to say about that? I do feel like the plot was being stretched in an odd direction to get her involved in the movie.
Right. Well, they made her. She was what everybody was after, because she's the scientist.
Yep, she was the MacGuffin. She was the catalyst.
She was MacGuffin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
She was that which brought Wakanda and Talocan into conflict.
If people in the studio right now, Murd, if you can see his expression, because this isn't on video, but his disdain for the Talocan. What did you think of the visual of the Undersea Kingdom?
That was absolutely on point.
Beautiful, wasn't it? Yeah,
that was beautiful. I just wish it was a little lighter so I could see it better. But I get why it's dark. It's in the
sure.
Tons of thousands of miles down below, and or whatever down below
the eyeballs of Homo Romanus are adapted to be more sensitive to the blue-green section of the visual spectrum, so they can see in the ocean depths.
Yeah, so thousands of feet
us.
down. It was very well done. For me, I can't wait to see it on TV where I can turn up the brightness a little bit and just see some of the stuff in the background.
Yep.
But I liked it. I liked it in a lot of ways better than the way they did Aquaman, because that looked too bright, too fake, too much.
Aquaman was more cartoony.
Oh, it was, and don't get me wrong,
there were
no
octopuses playing the drums here.
yeah. I still enjoyed it, but I do like how this turned out, and little details like when Namor comes out of the water, he doesn't wipe his face or anything; he just walks because he's used to that. Like they did a lot of details like that to just make you feel like they were living in the water for.
Well, the other great detail was, when they would be under the water, their skin is white. They'd emerge, it turned immediately blue, and they nailed that like every single time. You'd watch them, because I've seen it twice now. They would keep making sure that transition would occur.
That was interesting.
Was a worthy detail. Yeah. The scene when Shuri is being given her grand tour of the Talocan central capital, there was one scene where the camera just kind of pans up overhead and looks to it brings about it brings into clear focus the idea that underwater things are less linear. You don't just move from A to B across the surface. You exist in 3 dimensions underwater because gravity is lesser.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that society would be, and its architecture would be built around that increased mobility.
Sure.
Great. I'm so glad I'm here.
And
vintage Murd.
I gotta admit, it was a nice historical detail, if they're going to go all the way with this whole Mayan derivation thing, that they had some Talocanil kids playing pelota, the ancient sport of the Mayans, the ball through the stone hoop.
Yep.
Well done.
Yeah, that was.
What do we think of? Let's talk about Letitia Wright in the lead role. Like, what do we think of her performance?
I thought very.
You said
well
it
done.
earlier.
Yeah.
She had the weight of the world on her shoulders in a couple of different senses, both as actress and as the character she's playing. And she really showed her emotional range here.
Yeah.
When she finally, embraced the traditions of her people, at the same time as she let go of, the memory of her brother and her mother, and the anger that their loss made her feel. Burned the ceremonial garments there on the beaches of Haiti, and just allowed herself to weep. There were people in the theater with us weeping along.
Well, when she's remember when she told her mother, "Well, you're just thinking of a construct." And at the end, they take us because they have all these since these the previous movies.
Yeah.
Of her remembering T'Challa. Very powerful.
Yeah.
The first words of the entire movie are her uttering a personal prayer to Bast.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And just not having it answered, it kind of
It
estranges her from her faith
Yeah,
and her
absolutely.
culture for a little bit there.
But yeah, I was fighting back tears a couple times. I thought it was very, very well done. She was phenomenal.
And the death of the death of the Queen.
When they were holding her back.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was heart wrenching.
Yep. But the way they captured the flooding of Wakanda's central city,
Yeah.
I thought was also really well done. Again, the power of Namor's his military and everything they can do. What do you think of the sonic hypnosis? I thought that was a great.
Yeah,
that was creepy.
That was like
Doing
the
the
sirens,
really creepy
the siren
Lorelei
song.
routine.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning when they're on the CIA
platform.
sea elevated base, the whole crew just goes over the edge.
Yeah, and at first you couldn't quite hear it. It
that was all like a horror
very
film.
subtle, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, I'm looking around for somebody.
I thought there was sound leaking through from one of the
Yeah.
other theaters
Yep.
first.
Like
Yep.
when the one guard is looking through the binoculars, you sort of see like a head, but you're not sure what it is, and he can't really tell either.
Yep.
Those scenes, Beloved would be proud. Like those scenes that really were frightening.
And those two agents that were inside the bunker in that platform, so to speak, not to sound like they wasted it, but they wasted a lot of time on them, and I thought that they would be more important until they died.
I think they wanted just to show how terrifying it was.
Yes, and it was very well done and very well placed, and I appreciated the effort they put into that.
Well, when she's like shooting them out the helicopter and they just start getting up again, and it was...
Yeah, it was horrific.
Yeah.
It really was.
And that's... The Submariner, when you go back to the Golden Age, there is that element to the character. And they did not shy away from that at all. And that's one of the things of this movie I really, really enjoyed the most was, they again, that scene where he's pounding the glass with a spear and looking at her. And it just, the sheer rage in his eyes. I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Verging on madness.
Yeah.
So he has been alive for 500 years. So
In this version, yeah.
he's had plenty of time to develop mental
Not only
imbalances.
that, and also the strategic acumen, which he demonstrates at the end when he's explaining, well, this is why we're going to have this alliance, which I thought was a great scene.
Yeah.
I'm glad they had it there because I would only imagine they're going to do a lot more with Namor, I would hope, going
would
forward.
Do his people have elongated life at all, do you think? Because they didn't really say it or address it in the film.
Not to the extent that he does.
I figured not that
He's
he does, but-
he's basically like a demigod.
Yeah.
We saw his mother growing old while he remained a child.
But like his people might live a little bit longer, but nothing near.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, the minute I saw the helmet, I was like, oh, that's a Tuma. It wasn't rabbit ears, but it was close.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be the cartilaginous skull of a hammerhead.
Yeah. That was... I forgot in the comic. Is Namora, how is she related to him?
Cousin once removed.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. But what do we think of... I'm going to say Atlanteans because that's what I always think of. But
Thank you.
How they presented them. I thought they just nailed it. Like the look, the way they fought.
Yeah.
What do we think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, the rebreathers and kind of the eerie reverb quality every time they spoke. That was on point.
And I like how the rebreather could be reversed when they put it on Shuri as well.
Right.
So that she could breathe, even though they needed it for water, she could use it for
That's a good
just
point.
oxygen.
And I thought, again, horror film element, when they're on the bridge and the lanyard or whatever it is grabs Ironheart, you don't see anybody.
No.
And then they cut it, and then it goes back in the water, and you still don't see anybody. And then I think were they on
3 or 4
whales?
of them.
Yeah, there were
Yeah.
some humpbacks and some orcas in the river, which is fresh water, which is... Come to think of it, the river of Wakanda is also fresh water, so I'm not sure how they managed to get the whales to
They had a rebreather
to breathe.
themselves.
Yeah, sure.
But that's right out of the comic too, because many times we'll see Namor's forces using. They often have mechanized stuff. They also have sea life, right? That they're employing
Absolutely.
as weapons as well. So
Yeah.
that was again. I wasn't sure how they were going to do Namor, and I'm really excited about what they did with him. Like the performance of the actor because it could have been over the top rage. It wasn't. There was nuance.
Yeah.
But underneath all of it, as Murd said, was constant menace.
Yeah.
Constant. Like even when she's Shuri is with him and he's telling her his background, and not for a second did I think she was safe. Not for one moment at all.
No.
Even he made the joke about, well, we have suits you can wear, which I thought was funny, of course. But I thought that the way he was written, the way he was directed, the way he acted, it was. You always felt how powerful this being is and how dangerous he is.
Yeah, and I was glad that they didn't write Shuri to be more in awe of him. Like,
no.
She was trying at first, but then as soon as she realized,
was acting as he was, as a leader for people.
Yeah, and once that wasn't going to serve to protect Wakanda, that was it. All bets were off.
Yep.
How about Ross and Val?
That's where I was about to go.
Yep. Ross is still not Ross enough to suit me.
Well,
I mean, I know that the tone of this movie doesn't really lend itself to the kind of balls-to-the-wall comic relief that Everett K. Ross was in the comics.
Yes.
But it just felt like the subplot with him and Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, whose performance... Dreyfus, I feel, kind of phoned this one in, to be honest. I don't feel like she needed to be in the movie at all, and I don't think Ross really needed to be in it any further than the first confrontation with Okoye and Shuri, just to tell them, hey, you need to go to Cambridge and look up Riri Williams.
I kept expecting something to happen with him, something more, not even Wakanda related, but just because he's in here and something's happening, I thought something Marvel Universe cinematic would happen with him.
This is the third time I've seen him because he was in the
Civil War,
Black Panther, and this.
Yeah.
Like Murd said, and we'll talk about this in a moment when we discuss this, the arc from the comic, he is such a rich character in the book, and these movies don't really allow for that. That would have to be like a TV series.
Yeah, well,
essentially.
And don't get me wrong, I like that he was there. I just expected more out of the character.
I love
the movie.
I love that. I love that actor. I'm always happy to see him.
I do too.
But I'm always happy to see Ross because of my affinity, my soft spot for the comic book version. And I like that they've established, and this is right from the book too, that he develops this loyalty for Wakanda, and he appreciates, like he says, imagine if. As he said, think about what they're not doing with the vibranium versus what we would do if we had it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to the heart of Ross as a character.
Yeah.
That is absolutely something he'd say.
Which is very faithful to the book.
Now, correct me if I'm thinking wrong, but to me, the whole plot hole with his story arc is not with him. It's that Val bugged the beads because that would not happen. I don't think that they could be bugged.
The Kimoyo beads.
Yeah, because she said, well, we bugged him. I've heard everything. I'm like, I don't think you would have.
Yeah, I agree. It might be, it could be done perhaps, but I don't think she would be able to do it with her knowledge of technology on the spot.
And even at this point in the history of Wakanda in the Marvel Universe, I still don't think we would have that capability yet.
Probably not.
Considering that a kid just beat everybody to create a vibranium detector, I don't think that would have happened yet. That part was hard for me to go through.
It was servicing the plot.
Yeah,
in that
a little
sense.
too much.
I did like, though, how at the end they freed him.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's so much more they can do with his character if they had the time. Because again, he's really a limited supporting character.
Yeah,
but.
Sounds to me like he's going to be seeking asylum in Wakanda.
Yeah, absolutely.
He should be hanging around in the third movie.
And hopefully they'll give him a lot more to do.
Yeah.
In the comic, he's a State Department official. Here he is a CIA agent. But when they first cast, what's the name of the actor again?
For which role?
For Ross.
Oh, Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman.
Thank you.
When they cast him, I was like, oh, he's the perfect. Because I was thinking of the comic book Ross. I thought he's the perfect person to play this role.
Well. Michael J. Fox would have been perfect.
Michael J. Fox, or if you go back to Priest's interviews, he always thought of Chandler Bing from Friends when he thought of Ross, which totally makes sense.
Oh boy, I don't know if I would have thought of that.
So I hope they do a lot more with him. The other character I thought really stood out in this movie was Okoye.
Yeah,
definitely.
Gosh, did I feel bad for her? Holy cow! In the beginning,
and well, first of all, as they reminded us in the film, Wakabi, her husband, is in prison for treason. And when she's stripped of her rank, and her eyes like shimmering with grief and despair, and then she walks away ramrod straight because she's still in the presence of her queen. That was really well done. and again, exploring the ties between these characters and how much they clearly love each other. Again, that's great acting, great writing, but I love what they did with their character in this film.
And I'm not saying it's out of character for what happened, but I was surprised that they took the Queen's character in that route to be so against the council, because they're like, well, maybe we're going too fast on this. Maybe
but she lost everything. She lost everything.
Yep,
like that was her breaking point.
That's it.
That was a breaking point.
You've now lost my daughter. Nope, I'm done.
Yep.
So it served the story very well, but I was just surprised they went that way. But it was good for the story.
Yeah. What'd you think of her performance? Okoye?
Okoye. Oh, yes. I agree. It's very, very powerful, riveting, and showing a lot of range, really, because she was doing some. You don't think of Okoye as the kind of character that would have jokes, but there was some humor deriving from her too. I loved her reaction to the Midnight Angel armor.
Yeah,
which is from the Ta-Nehisi Coates run of Black Panther.
I thought so. Yeah.
So that's right. That's right from the book.
I was wondering if
from the book,
if that was in canon kind of stuff for the book.
I mean, they lifted that from the page, essentially. Looked great too.
Yeah.
As Murd mentioned, though, when they talk about the wonder of Wakanda, when that, I guess I'll call it an aircraft carrier, comes out of the water, and it is
massive,
enormous, and
the sea leopard.
So I mean, they don't shy away from what the book does at its best, which is to capture how advanced the society is compared to any other country on Earth.
Yeah,
basically, and that was beautifully done again and again. So, God, I love this film. I really love this movie. I thought it was, because it could have gone really awry. Like, it really could have gone bad. But I think, Coogler was the same director, and he clearly had a vision, and they didn't shy away from the fact that we've lost our star, but we're going to take that, and we're going to really honor that and make something great out of it.
Yeah.
I think they did.
I think so too.
I mean, wow.
I have a lot of faith in Marvel movies and the TV shows. They're doing good work almost flawlessly.
I would agree with that in general. Yeah.
So even knowing everything that was happening behind the scenes when Chadwick passed away, and they decided and announced that they were still going to go forward, I had a lot of faith that it would be well done, because I couldn't imagine them doing it where it wouldn't be reverent and honorable and spectacular.
And I think they achieved that right from the opening, where they had images of him in the opening credit sequence.
I love when they do that.
Yeah,
I love when they do that, when there's a purpose behind it.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, for me, his performance as T'Challa is one of the greatest performances in any of these films, because right when he first appeared in Civil War, I remember going, "Oh wow, this is it! Like, he's the Black Panther! Like, they totally got it."
The scene with him and his father is one of my favorites in the entire franchise.
Fathers and sons.
And
it's
I
a
like
shame
that
thing.
I like that they touch on that throughout a lot of things with Black Panther, the father-son stuff all the way through.
Yeah, it's and then right, even in the scene where she's with Killmonger, and he says, "Well, your brother spared the guy who killed your father." And I love how they always explore, and they do this very much with Namor too, all of the areas of this world that are you have to make a choice, which direction you're going to go,
and there's always consequences.
And you can see the other side. Like Killmonger, is it N'Jadaka? N'Jadaka. So his character is there because you can kind of go like, oh, I kind of see what he's saying, and you kind of get a sense of why he is the way he is. And I think it was a stroke of brilliance to bring him back for that scene.
Oh, I do too.
I thought it, because it really captured where she was and what her struggle was.
Yeah. Especially, it's like, well, you called me.
Yeah.
I'm not here by chance. You called me.
And I'm really glad they did not do a regenerated Chadwick Boseman for that.
Oh, I am too. I was
concerned they were going to do that.
Even at the end when she's burning the burial clothes that she wore, and really thinking, I was afraid they were going to just put like a hand on her shoulder or something, and I'm so glad they didn't do that.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Murd?
I have expected that a big surprise reveal would be that they actually were able to get something, like a few minutes of footage with Chadwick Boseman before he passed away. But I guess the last time he played T'Challa would have been for the What If series on Disney Plus,
which he did win an Emmy for, if I'm not mistaken.
Posthumously, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the kid?
We talked about it briefly before the recording. It's not that I went into the movie thinking that was going to happen, but when the Queen was trying to get Shuri to go through their traditions on the beach before Namor came out of the water, and she goes, "I have to tell you something." That was going to be it to me.
Yeah, that was going to be it, but I didn't think that's what she was going to say.
Yeah, completely forgotten about that.
So it's a quick little moment, then it's gone.
At that point, I'm thinking, well, it's got to be something important. And then when you find her seeking out, I forget her character's name, his love interest,
Nakia.
She's
when
a war
you find
dog,
that, and there's a little bit of an explanation why she's not at the funeral, but they kind of cut that scene short.
Yes, they did.
There was something more there. And then as you go through it, I just thought, well, maybe he had a kid, because that would make some sense to me.
Yep, it's his father and son sense tingling, I
guess. It just made sense to me. And then when you showed him, like, oh, okay, well, that's what I kind of expected. Maybe not completely that way, that he would have been hidden, or I don't know, but it just made sense to me. And then again,
the kid looks like he's about what? What age do you think that kid is about?
Well, see, they said since what's her name again? Nakia's been gone for 6 years,
and he was gone for 5 because he was in the blip.
He was in the blip, so the kid's got to be like 8 to me, 10.
So that means he
looked about it.
He was born before the blip.
Maybe.
Yeah,
but they don't age during the blip. So if the kid disappeared in the blip, I mean, Nakia left, but like they didn't explain who disappeared from the blip.
Well, when Okoye say after Thanos, you left. So she was obviously crushed because T'Challa vanished.
Okay, so then the kid would have been born. It's only been 5 or 6 years since the blip. So in reality, the kid should only be like 5 or 6.
Well, how many years MCU time have passed since the events of Endgame?
They've been a little bit vague on that, and I think they're vague on it to try and catch up to real time then. In the end.
Oh, just look how much older little Cassie Lang is in the upcoming Quantumania.
Right. And she
did not vanish in the blip, right? She did not.
She lived through it.
Yeah.
And from the Cassie we had in Endgame to the Cassie we had in this preview, even in Endgame, she still looked older than what I think she should have been for just those 5 years passing. Because in Endgame, it's only 5 years later.
Right.
And now there's been a couple years, so maybe 7, 8-ish. But to me, the kid looked a little bit older than that.
Well, I thought it was a very poignant scene.
Yeah.
His Haitian name is after the Haitian leader who led a slave revolt against the French. But when he said, "I'm Prince T'Challa," and you think, I mean, well, they do something with this kid now in the future, because they could.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Wasn't somewhere in the Priest run, wasn't there a glimpse into an alternate future where T'Challa actually had a kid and he was kind of a spoiled brat?
But the kid, yes, that's so good.
And was it T'Chanda or something?
I forgot his name. It's the 1 month where Marvel did those amazing giant size issues. This is in the early 2000s.
Like the monsters,
the monster
100-page monster.
And it's a possible future where T'Challa is dying because of injuries he received fighting Iron Fist, which is also in the Priest run, and his son has become this corrupt heir who is like self-centered and actually dangerous, and T'Challa actually has to take on his own son. It's great stuff. So
yeah,
I mean, they're not going to do that, of course, but it's a great story.
And they may not really ever see the kid for 5-10 years. But it's just the point that there is lineage there to go on.
Yep.
When Shuri can't do it anymore for whatever reason, there is somebody to follow and protect Wakanda in the future. Doesn't matter if it's now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but there is somebody there that can do it. And there have been preparations made from T'Challa to begin that before he passed away.
Well, again, T'Challa, always the master planner, as she was saying, he didn't want the boy to be out there to have the pressure put on him. He didn't want them to come to the funeral so no one would know about him. Like there was that whole, which is just classic T'Challa. But,
which had to be something that she explained to the Queen when they cut that scene short. That would have been the next discussion.
The Queen already knew about, because that's what she was going to tell Shuri about.
That's only, but she didn't know that they didn't have Like she said, well, we missed you at the funeral, which was fine, but she knew that they weren't coming, but still saying that she missed him. But then she would have then said, well, we honored him here doing this kind of thing to still show the reverence from a Wakandan standpoint in Haiti kind of by themselves, is my guess.
Also loved in that final battle the way they showed the technology of Namor's forces, everything incorporated water, the bombs, it was all like the imagination they put into it. And again, they really went to the source material. You just know that Coogler's people have read a lot of these books, and they really apply that, which of course I appreciate immensely.
It makes so much sense. I mean, a main component of water is hydrogen, very explosive if it's used the right way. So it makes sense to have these little bomb-like grenade things that can do tons more damage.
When they brought the nets with hundreds of them.
Oh my god! I thought, that ship's done. That ship's going down.
Where do you think they're going to take this next? Like if they do a Black Panther 3, which probably be years from now. But
I'm trying to think. So we've already seen what they have laid out for the next few years.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think what would be next for Namor to do.
Namor has to be in Fantastic Four at some point.
I would think, but I don't think that'll be in the first one.
Probably
I'd be
not.
surprised if it's in the first one because that just wouldn't make sense to me. I think, like you said, Chris, you need a Doctor Doom. You need more geopolitical stuff in the Marvel Universe to be happening. And now you have Wakanda saying that they'll protect their secret. They'll protect their borders
the oceans,
and everything. And they won't tell anybody that they're there. But now Ross knows that they're there, but he's with Wakandans, so that's not going to really be...
Well, the United States suspects there's some other actor out there,
So now there's something that's going to start happening, but it could take years. And if anything from the surface world moves against it, for right now, Wakanda's going to be there to stop it. And that's going to start some geopolitical stuff.
Well, and this is also where you can get into... Because inevitably they're going to bring Doom in at some point.
I would hope so.
And, if you really bring in Latveria and his role and his place on the world stage, there's so much they can do with just the Latveria, Wakanda, Submariner, those societies.
Well, and to me, when they're all sitting around the table, it's Ross and Val and the general, whoever he was, and Richard Schiff's character, and they're all talking. Was it somebody we know? Like, not that would mean anything, but to me, they may already know that there's a Doom out there, even though it's not written in the script. The actors don't know it, but in storytelling, in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, to me, Kevin Feige's like in the back of his head going, well, we're going to put this here, and maybe that will turn into something if we can do it.
Good point. So I always love how Shane can write this stuff. He always comes up with good ideas. We're still waiting for the FF's headquarters to be Tony Stark's former Avengers.
If that happens, I'm not kidding. I'm going to cheer from the highest mountains because I've said that since day one.
You've been calling that for years.
We'll have Ian play the previously on Comic Geek sound effect and just prove to the world that Shane thought of it first.
If they don't do this, I'm going to freak. Because, it makes such sense. Somebody said back before all of this was happening, and they said, well, it's supposed to be Oscorp. I'm like, oh, God, no, don't let it be Oscorp. That'd be kind of stupid. I don't want Stark Towers to be Oscorp. It's got to be something for the FF.
Well, that movie's coming. I think it's not for another few years, but
like 2024, 25.
Yeah, but
something ridiculous.
Nothing's been cast yet or anything, right? Not that we know of.
No, not that we know of. Although I don't know about that. There may have been one role cast that I saw somewhere, but I'm not sure if it is or not, so I'm not saying anything because I don't know how true it was. I don't know if it was put out there or if it was just somebody making stuff up.
Okay. Can you tell me off the air?
Yeah, I'm going to look it up quick and see if I can find it.
One thing when we talk about what they might do in the future, one thing I was thinking about from the moment I saw this, because they talked about, again, that Namor is something that people have glimpsed. Is he real? I would love it if they, because he's hundreds of years old in this version, that Steve Rogers knew him from World War II. Like, and if highly classified, whatever. But that would be really interesting because if you go into the book, one of the only surface dwellers Namor will actually acknowledge in a sense where he will actually make way for is Captain America, essentially. So I don't know if they probably won't do that, but because I don't know what they're going to do with Steve Rogers. They've been questioning whether or not he's even still alive.
Right. I think it would be a neat idea to have a good flashback with a few minutes of that, but I don't think they would.
The invaders, Murd.
Right.
I would love to see it.
We saw the Golden Age Human Torch in that chamber in the first Captain America film at the World's Fair, Carnival, whatever.
Absolutely.
It was.
With what's her name from Doctor Who?
Who are you talking to? Nobody else is here.
I know, but I forget her name. Matt Smith's.
Karen Gillan?
No.
Oh,
What?
The other one.
Yeah, yeah, she's Nebula.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I forget her name, but I love her. And when she had that little cameo in the first Captain America movie,
one of the girls with Bucky.
Yeah. Yep. The brunette.
In case you're wondering, ladies and gentlemen, there's someone else
There's a
here.
ghost.
There's a ghost here. He seems to flit in every time we have a live recording.
And now the ghost is Googling.
Yeah. Which is fine because I was going to do it.
Clara.
That's it. Clara.
Fucking name Clara.
Jenny.
Jenna Coleman.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ghost.
We'll get there.
Joanna Constantine also.
Okay, we'll get there.
Fuck. Getting old.
Thank you,
Very helpful.
Phantasm of the CGS studio.
Albeit slightly profane ghost.
Thank you, Thing.
Apologies. Earmuffs.
You're good.
Still too late. Sorry.
You're good. You got there before I could.
I so would have yelled about 10 minutes ago, it's not a Tuma, but I couldn't do that.
Okay, you notice how the floodgates are starting to open now?
Yeah.
What other comments do you want to make about the movie that we haven't addressed that you think are relevant?
Just pleased that it was very well done. I didn't expect it not to be, but it's just nice to know that it was.
It actually exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
Like it really did. I'm really impressed. Like
every actor in it, every emotional thread that went through it, every tear that was shed, every look on their face, I thought was absolutely based in reality for everything that they knew from their friend.
Mm-hmm.
Very rare is the superhero movie, let alone superhero sequels,
yeah,
that aspires to art as much as this movie did.
Yeah.
So
Well
yes,
put, Murd.
my expectations were also exceeded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about, and I know you couldn't get
No,
through.
that's okay. It was my fault. I kept falling asleep.
Just
Kept
briefly.
falling asleep.
We're going to
Talk
talk just
away.
a little bit about what for me is my favorite Black Panther story of all time in comics, which is from my beloved Christopher Priest run, issues 26 to 30, which Murd, you said the title because you pronounce it better than I do.
Sturm und Drang, which translates to storm and stress.
Yes.
And in keeping with that, on the cover of the first issue of the arc, we have Black Panther and Storm.
Yes.
It's the X-Man Storm.
And this storyline is, for me, the first time I really realized, this is about year 2000 it came out, I think, that the Marvel Universe had a geopolitical space to it that was never really explored the way Priest explores it. Now, Shane, I know what you were trying to read these at night when you were tired, and I understand why you couldn't stay awake because, and I mean this in the best possible way, these stories you have to work.
They're
You've got to work.
dense.
You got to work, because he's throwing in, like he's obviously a very politically savvy person, Priest, as a writer and as a human being, and he clearly understands politics and the different systems and how they work or don't work and how they interact. And he takes all that and he puts it into the Marvel Universe. And we think today about, like when we read about Russia and Ukraine and all that's going on there, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes between all these different heads of state and who's talking to who. And like, are we putting pressure on Zelensky? Who's talking to Putin? Like, we're nobody. So we're only getting what the news is telling us. And you can find different sources to maybe get a more fuller picture of things. And I think what's fascinating about this storyline, which I'll get into the details in a moment, is Priest pulls back that curtain and he shows you these different heads of state. In this case, Magneto, Doom, Namor, and T'Challa, and Gar from the Deviants.
Mm-hmm.
And their negotiations as they try to navigate this near global war. And I thought in the movie, obviously they couldn't go into that much detail in the movie, that elaborate, but they explored that facet of the Marvel Universe through and Wakanda's place in that in the film too. And as you pointed out, Shane, Shuri at the end commits them to, well, we're going to defend the oceans, and so she's putting Wakanda now definitely on a collision course with other countries in the cinematic universe.
By forging
really
this dangerous alliance with this volatile, hitherto unknown world power.
And to a certain extent, thinking she had the upper hand when really in the end, she's kind of playing into his hands anyway.
Well, they're using each other, which is often what happens when you're dealing with the interests of nations. She prevented a war. She saved Ironheart.
Yeah.
And he has a new ally. Now, the storyline we're going to discuss here briefly is that in this part of the Priest run, Gesundheit.
Thank you.
Well, the story opens with, you guys remember the Maximum Security crossover?
Yep.
So all the aliens were dumped on, like the prisons were let out. It's almost like the Mary LaBoatliff when Castro's and all the criminals to the United States in the early 1980s, and they're all dumped on Earth. And the story opens with the aftermath of that, and they're cleaning up aliens in Wakanda, and there's this child who looks human, and the deviants demand this child back. They say it's one of ours, and they want to kill the child. Why don't you explain who the deviants are in the Marvel Universe?
Right. Well, they're not ugly-looking Decepticons as they were in the movies.
No, that's right. They were in that. Okay.
Yes, they
and the
some
Eternals,
characters
right.
called deviants were in that movie.
That's right.
Yes,
but about that.
But in the comics, the deviants were similar to the Eternals. They were an offshoot of humanity created by the genetic tinkering of the godlike Celestials who visited Earth just many, many millennia ago. But whereas the Eternals became immortal, godlike, near-perfect specimens of what the human genome could produce, the deviants were just... They were defiant of Mendelian genetics. Each successive generation of deviant looked nothing like their forebears. It's just like a complete mutation of the genome with each successive generation. Yes,
yeah.
And they're all what we as humans would consider monstrous.
Yes.
Although every once in a while a normal human-looking deviant would appear.
Like this child.
Yes, and like the gladiator ransack the reject. And they tended to have
monsters.
You what?
They're the monsters. With what's her name being the quote.
Right, Marilyn. Right. Every once in a while, there's a Marilyn.
Marilyn. Okay.
Yes. And this child was such a Marilyn monster, and eventually we learn that she's actually the offspring of the archpriest Gaur himself.
So, just like, think of all the stories in our own politics, of course, Priest is attuned to, where you have some sanctimonious political figure who acts a certain way, and then they to try to convert people to their ideology, and they have also this paragon of whatever virtue they're representing. And as we all know, as we're all middle-aged men, that's usually a complete, facade. And he plays that here, and that for a lot of this is Gower trying to cover up, so he doesn't expose himself politically to his own people, that he's actually a hypocrite and he's betrayed his own ideals. And he had this tryst with this other deviant, this normal-looking human, and he wants to kill the kid to protect himself. And T'Challa, and if people haven't read the Priest run, I know I've talked about ad nauseum in the show. Without this run, there is no Black Panther films, period. They borrow heavily from that and the Don McGregor Jungle Action stories, which came out in the 70s. That's the core of what makes the Black Panther the character he is. And Priest, especially, his fingertips are all over these films in many ways, big and small. But where in this movie they're trying to protect this scientist, in this story that we're talking about, T'Challa's protecting this child, and because he's the master strategist, he realizes, wait a minute, why does he really want to kill this kid? What are his true motivations here? And he's determined to protect the child. And again, Priest explores how Atlantis has a pact with the Deviants, and Latveria has a pact with Atlantis if they're attacked. So you have this situation where there's almost a full-scale war between these countries, and the United States will also get involved in it. And I don't want to spoil too much if people haven't read it, because I think if you love the Black Panther movies, you should read the whole Priest run, period, but definitely this story. What's your general impression of this story? I know you read it for this episode.
Well, it absolutely does put Priest's strengths as a writer on display. And I do love just the geopolitical maneuverings and just this complex web of alliances and betrayals and such. Like it's kind of, I see it as a microcosm for the tight-knit continuity of the Marvel Universe as a whole, because all these characters, in addition to just what we see on paper, these relationships of political power between them, like the Atlanteans will go to war to defend Lemuria, and Latveria will go to war to defend its pact with Atlantis, and blah, blah, blah. But you can see that as kind of a metaphor for the connections that have developed between these characters.
Yes.
These Marvel Universe monarchs who have also been heroes or villains, quote unquote. And that's what we get in this story. It's like a convocation of different Marvel characters who have also been leaders of sovereign nations, like Namor, Magneto, ruler of Genosha at that time, and Doctor Doom and so forth. But they've all had long, spotty, ugly histories with one another.
Which comes out in the relationships in the story.
Yes, like who enslaved whom or whom betrayed whom. And frequent mention is made between the characters of, we don't want this to become the Khyber Island incident all over again, which is a reference to an obscure yes. like a Defenders story from the 70s.
And what's great about this story, and another reason why I love the run so much, is, and I'm sure Murd will attest to this, when you're reading this arc, there are so many editorial boxes. Read this issue. Go back to Marvel Team Up this story where Storm first appeared with T'Challa.
Yes, and read Heroes for Hire, the John Ostrander run, to see Lord Gower form the Anti-Mind.
Yeah, so Priest, and again, to me this is the mark of a great writer, he takes all the history, which is in some cases very elaborate or contradictory, and he folds it all into this story and this whole run. The Black Panther's entire history, and also the Marvel Universe's whole history, is here. And he makes sense of it.
Yep. He
makes it all the more thrilling to read.
Integrates everything. He even, like those weird Jack Kirby stories.
That comes later, yeah.
Yeah. Not in this arc, but over the course of the entire run, he just makes use of just about every single mention of Black Panther and or Wakanda that's ever been made in a Marvel comic anywhere. And he puts it all together seamlessly and he makes art of it.
Yes, he does. And two things that are also very important in the storyline. We mentioned this before. This is where we first really explore the relationship between T'Challa and Storm, and the way they capture their relationship is so powerful. And our ghost in the room will appreciate this. There's a page from this story where T'Challa and Storm embrace and kiss, and he admits to her that he's afraid because in the previous page she had told him you're going to become like Magneto basically because he thought he knew everything. And it's my Grail page, and I found it this year. I never thought I'd find this page. I also have the page, the spread where it's all of them in the high school room and they're all talking. It's like a 2-page spread. I have that. Thanks to the ghost, I have that as well. So, but that's just a little original art sidebar there. But the way they explore the consequences of T'Challa being a king. And they bring in the Monica character who's his lover throughout since like the 60s and all these different storylines and the damage that's been done to her because she's been caught in the gravitational pull of his world. And what's great about this storyline, as much as it's exploring the geopolitical side, it's also exploring how the T'Challa is ultimately just a man and he's trying to be this larger-than-life monarch and carry all this weight on his shoulders and the price of that to his personal life, which is beautifully captured in these stories.
Pursuant to that, Storm also brings across to him a point regarding his humanity. She says that the one thing that keeps him from becoming like Magneto is Everett K. Ross.
And if you read,
he is an anchor to humanity.
Well, and Priest always said he created Ross so the audience would have he's into this amazing world, and his reaction, and plus his again, there's so many caption boxes in these issues because it's Ross narrating the story for us.
So far.
And of course it's the humor because it's Priest's humor.
Yep, he wants to give us a little recap of the Eternals and the Deviants and the Celestials, and he just says, remember that cartoon, The Groovy Ghoulies? There you go. and that's all he says about it.
Yeah, it's I've spoken this series so many times over the years, but more than ever, I think people who really appreciate the world of Black Panther, the whole Priest run, I think, is essential reading. And like Murd said, and I said too, and again to make Shane feel better about falling asleep, and I think this is why they're so rewarding. You got to work. Like these are dense comics because he's really, especially this story in particular, because he's exploring and really magnifying what's always kind of been there, but he brings it to the surface. The whole elaborate matrix of the Marvel Universe's sort of geopolitical space. And I also love how he explores, like, the Nami is T'Challa's original mother. Nami battle cruisers, all the technology, and it's just awe-inspiring in these stories.
Those big, frightening, disc-shaped war wheel things.
Yeah, and Ross is like,
hover ominously around deviant Lemuria.
And Ross is like, he could have had these parked in the East River, and we would never know. And also in these stories is when Priest. There's one page where he basically it's Ross testifying to the UN. Because basically in the story, Claw, of course, the old foe who killed T'Chaka, and the White Wolf, not Bucky Barnes from the movies, but T'Challa's
foster brother,
who's a white guy who became the head of the Wakandan secret police.
Yes, his origin's kind of a riff on the Tarzan origin.
Yes, and very much a riff. And Nakia in the movie, they call her a dog of war. In the comic, they're far more sinister. They're the secret police of Wakanda, essentially. So there's a whole plot, which I won't get into too much about, between Claw and the White Wolf, and they're each doing it for the different reasons, but Claw is trying to draw T'Challa out by starting this war between all these different powers. So it also explores the history between those two characters, because Claw killed, his father. So that was also really well done. But just go ahead, Murd.
It makes me sad that the cinematic universe version of Claw is already lost to us.
Yeah, he was disposed of pretty quickly.
Andy Serkis was playing him very well.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He had the one brief in Avengers 2, and then...
Yeah.
So...
He's a very good actor.
Yes, he is.
You will appreciate him in the future.
You're hinting at something.
Yep. You will appreciate him in the future.
Is this an off-air discussion? Or are you just going to leave it in...
I'm just leaving it at that for now.
Is this an Andor thing?
I'm not saying
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to say about the Storm Undrung?
Well, Chris, I thank you for this opportunity to revisit this.
I know you'd read it before in the past.
Yes, and I did needed to do a little digging to find the issues, but it's very enjoyable for the reasons previously stated. But even as I read it, I knew that the story we'd see on screen wouldn't bear too much similarity.
No, I mean,
because there aren't enough Marvel Cinematic Universe world powers out there. But we have to wait until Latveria shows up. And,
absolutely,
and maybe Magneto at some point. Who knows?
I would hope so. I go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the one similarity was Riri Williams basically serves the same function as that little human-looking deviant.
And when they did that, I was thinking, you know what? I just feel like they read this story and it influenced them to some degree, because Namor and Wakanda and the whole idea of Namor demanding, being involved in demanding this innocent, essentially, is very much from this book. But as you said, Murd, the MCU hasn't been developed that, because Priest is now calling on decades of comic book history when he created these stories, which obviously they don't have that yet for the movie/TV series. But what pleased me in the film was the spirit of what I'm reading in these stories, I think, was on the screen. And I only hope they can go even further with it. You know what? Another thing I thought of when you mentioned Magneto, and this is what Priest does very well through Ross speaking. At one point, Ross is talking about the X-Men. And we think of the X-Men, of course, as heroic, because we're the reader, right?
Sure.
But in that world, Ross is basically saying, well, we don't really know who they are, and we're not sure if they're terrorists or not. And he's reminding us that the people living in the Marvel Universe who are just regular people, like the X-Men, are frightening. And people aren't really sure what their agenda is, what their interests are. Because as the reader, we know what the X-Men are doing. But if you're living in that world, are they even real? Like, do you get glimpses of them? And I always, just like in one of the earlier Priest stories, Ross says, well, the Avengers might actually be fascists, actually. And again, that the idea of perspective, which is so important, understanding when you're dealing with other countries and cultures, and obviously we assume, well, it's got to be that way, but then someone else is like, well, no, we think it's this way. And like, how can you believe that? But you have that back and forth. And I think he always goes back to that point so powerfully in these stories. And in the film we just watched, you understand where Namor is coming from. Like, from a purely Machiavellian sense, I understand why he wants to have that girl killed. Because she's a threat. She represents a threat to his nation.
And that's something I thought they beautifully shown when he came out of the water as a kid to bury his mother.
Yeah.
And look at what he saw with all the enslavement going on.
Spanish enslavers and everything else.
Well, you do have to wonder. I mean, the government has already co-opted this girl's technology, without her knowledge, to create this vibranium detector. So wouldn't you think they the specs are already on record someplace, and killing the girl wouldn't really...
That's my one fault with Namor's thinking in this is, like, if he would just have sat down for a split second to listen to the girl, he may have been able to realize that even though she invented it, somebody else opted and did it, so she's not the threat anymore, because even if he kills her, other people are just going to build another one at some point.
Well, that could be a plot device going forward.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because we obviously know the other powers are going to continue to try to get their hands on technology, and plus, as we mentioned, if they introduce, I'm sure they're going to introduce Latveria at some point, which I cannot. Again, I was hoping there'd be another extra scene where they'd actually show Doom.
Yeah.
Because when you bring in Namor, to me, Doom is the next obvious step you go.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that's coming down the pike. And like I said, I really want to see Namor interact with Sue. Because I thought the actor played Namor was phenomenal. I really enjoyed his performance immensely. I don't want to say his name out loud because I'm going to butcher it, but he was... Murd, you want to go for it?
Mejia.
Okay.
Yes.
He was terrific.
Mejia.
He was terrific. So,
who admitted in an interview a little while ago that he can't swim.
Really?
Irony
I'm
of
assuming
ironies.
he can now. I mean...
Well, he had plenty of opportunity to practice.
What do you think of the look of Namor, actually, the way they had him look?
When I saw it in the previews originally, I didn't like it.
Okay.
It works much better seeing the film.
What do you think the change was?
An understanding of what their culture is in the film.
Oh, so like the adornments on him and everything. Okay.
Yeah. The pin through the nose was a bit of a distraction, but other than that, he reminded me of the Jay Lee take on Namor from the comics of the 90s. Good point, Murd. Good point. That's an excellent callback. I thought, first of all, I love they had the green trunks in a sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they had the wings...
Which I thought would be silly, and they weren't.
They were not. And they had the ears.
They did.
And the hair, and just the raw physical power.
Yep.
Nailed it. But like you guys said... That scene, well, first of all, when you just see the shadow with the helicopter, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is Namor. But when they're on the beach, when he comes out of that water, I'm like, oh my God, he's frightening.
Yeah.
Like, and that they didn't shy away from that. So that was...
They could have taken it. I mean, they may be saving this for future projects, like maybe one of the FF movies. But if he could have generated a tidal wave or ridden on the back of a giant green humanoid whale named Giganto... That would have taken it to the next level.
But he said Imperious Rex.
Yeah.
Well, no, he uttered a few...
in his dialect.
Like Mayan dialect syllables that nonsensically translated into Latin are the equivalent of Imperious Rex.
But I love that they had it there, though. That was great.
It didn't really give me the thrill I would have liked it to.
Any other comments on the film?
No. I
believe our vibranium bolt has been shot.
Yes. Yeah. What's your rating, brother?
4.5.
Murd?
4.75. I withhold that quarter of a frickin' swear for the honor of Atlantis. Imperious Rex.
I have to give it a solid 5. I was moved. Like, I was actually moved. I mean, whereas I love all these movies, the first Black Panther film moved me because they're so reverent towards the source material. This movie took that to an even higher level because you were watching, you could see the energy and passion they put into it because of the loss of the actor himself, and that came through in the story. And it was moving. Like it's one of the best sequels, certainly. And like Murd said, sequels are hard. That's one of the best sequels they've done. One of the best movies they've done. Oh,
absolutely. But one problem I did have throughout the entire film is the same thing I had with Black Adam. At some points, I got tired of the action slowing down every 5 seconds to see what was going on. I appreciated it at times, but...
Black Adam did it a lot more, though.
Oh, it sure did. It sure did. Yeah, it really did. Whew. But, yeah, I was like, speed it up just a little bit. It's action.
Well, gentlemen, this fellowship, as I have hands on both their shoulders, I'm looking forward to this for quite some time.
It was good.
It's great to be back in the studio. Great to see the film with you.
Yeah.
Great to be able to talk about it. But like Murd said, our vibranium bolt is shot.
Yeah. Indeed.
All right, folks. Well, there you are. I'm sure you've been dying to hear Professor Eberly hold forth about this movie. Now you have heard it. And we give thanks to you, our listeners, for all forms of support you have given us recently. You sponsored this in every episode via your donations to Patreon and any other forms of contribution you'd care to make. And if you haven't been doing that lately, then we encourage you to just spread the word about the show.
Leave a review.
Yeah, just leave a positive review wherever you download your podcast, or just tell a friend, as Ian likes to say. Every little bit helps. And thank you for helping us keep the lights on in the studio that we're actually using tonight.
Yep.
All right, Shane, are you ready to be Shane?
I am.
All right,
He's poised.
Let me give you some Shaning music.
Shaning music. All right. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/comicgeekspeak. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, send in Muddle the Murds. We're getting desperately low, and we need some to muddle the Murd. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the episode, and as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.